All right, welcome back, everyone. In this section, we're just going to get some more practice in solving linear equations. So in this section, you're going to learn how to use the general method to solve a linear equation, how to identify equations with infinite solutions or no solution, and then how to solve proportions. So these following steps will help you solve any linear equation with one variable. So if the equation contains fractions, multiply both sides by the least common denominator to get rid of the fractions. Once you've done that, distribute to remove any parentheses. You can then simplify each side by combining like terms. We're then going to use the additive property to get the variable terms on one side, the number terms on the other side. Then the multiplicative property to get the variable by itself. And then you can check your answer at the end. If any of these one steps are not necessary, skip it and go to the next one. So let's practice this. We want to solve this equation. Well, there's no fraction, so we can skip the first step. But we do have something we have to distribute. And so we're going to distribute the 4. And we're going to get 4 times 2x, which is 8x, minus 4 times 3, which is 12, plus 7, equals 3x plus 5. Now we want to combine like terms on both sides. 8x, negative 12 plus 7 is negative 5. That's equal to 3x plus 5. Now we want to move variable terms to one side, so we can subtract 3x from both sides. And we want to move number terms to the other side, so we can add 5 to both sides. Now negative 5 plus 5 is 0. 3x minus 3x is 0. 8x minus 3x is just 5x. And 5 plus 5 is just 10. And finally, to get x by itself, we can just divide by 5. 10 divided by 5 is 2. And so we can go back to the original equation and plug in 2, and we should see that both sides are equal to each other. So in our next example, we do have fractions. And so the first thing we want to do is multiply by the least common denominator in order to get rid of these fractions. And so our denominators are 2 and 3. And so the least common denominator is going to be 6. And so we're going to take each term, or depending on how you want to think about it, each side of the equation. And we're going to multiply both sides by 6. Well, the 6 will distribute to each term. And what you're going to wind up with is 6x over 2 minus 6 equals 12x over 3 minus 18. And 6 divided by 2 is just 3x minus 6. And 12 divided by 3 is 4x minus 18. And now we want to move x's to one side and numbers to the other. So we can subtract 3x from both sides. That'll give us 0. And here we're left with 1x. We can then add 18 to both sides. And you're left with 12. And so 1x is equal to 12. Or just x equals 12. So in this example, we have some more fractions, plus some distributing. And so we've got 2 times x plus 3 over 3 equals 6x plus 2. Now there's only one denominator, so the least common denominator is just 3. And we're going to multiply both sides of the equation by 3. So 3 times 2 is 6 times x plus 3 divided by 3. 3 times 6x is 18x plus 6. Well, 6 divided by 3 over here on the left, that's just going to leave you with 2. And if we distribute that, we get 2x plus 6 equals 18x plus 6. We want to move the x's to one side so we can subtract 2x from both sides. Move numbers to the other side so we can subtract 6 from both sides. But now both of these add to 0, and so we're left with 0 equals 16x. And then we can divide by 16, but you should see that x equals 0. So not every linear equation has only one solution. Some have no solution or an infinite number of solutions. So when you're solving a problem, if all the variables add to 0, then you have one of two things that could happen. If you wind up with a true statement, so something like 0 equals 0, then there are an infinite number of solutions. X can be anything and the equation will still be equal to itself. If you wind up with not a true statement, so something like 0 equals 15, right? Obviously that's not true, then there's no solution. There's no x value that will solve the equation. So the thing to remember to watch for is the variables adding to 0. Not the numbers, the variables. In our last example, the numbers added to 0, and we still got a solution. What we're looking for is the variables to add to 0. And so we've got 4 times 3x plus 2 equals 12x plus 8. Well, if we distribute the 4, we get 12x plus 8 equals 12x plus 8. To move the variables to one side, we just want to subtract 12x from both sides. And if we do that, that adds to 0, but this 12x also adds to 0. And what we're left with is 8 equals 8. Notice that's a true statement, and so this means we have an infinite number of solutions. So this just means that x can be any value, and you should be able to see that in this intermediate step here. Regardless of what x is, 12x plus 8 equals 12x plus 8. Whether x is 1, 5, negative 2, negative 17, negative 10,000, those two sides will always be equal to each other. And so you get an infinite number of solutions, or x is any real number. And notice we've got that because the variable's added to 0. Let's try another example. We got 3x minus 7 is equal to 3 times x plus 1. Well, we can distribute on the right-hand side. And we get 3x minus 7 is equal to 3x plus 3. Now, we want to subtract 3x from both sides so we can move the x's. Well, 3x minus 3x is 0 and 0, and we're left with negative 7 is equal to 3. Obviously, this is not a true statement. Negative 7 is not equal to 3. And so what that means is there's no solution to this equation. There's no x value that you could plug in where both sides will be equal. And once again, you can see that here. regardless of what x is, 3 times x will always be the same thing. And then if you subtract 7 from one and add 3 to the other, they'll never be the same number. So there's no way that these two can ever be equal to each other. Finally, we need to talk a little bit about solving proportions. To solve a proportion, you simply want to cross multiply and set both sides equal to each other. And so by cross multiplying, we basically mean A times D is equal to B times C. So we can use this idea of solving proportions to solve linear equations by just cross multiplying. So for example, 9 over 4x is equal to 6 over 2. We have 9 over 4x is equal to 6 over 2. Well, we can cross multiply and set them equal to each other. 9 times 2 is 18. 4x times 6 is 24x. And now to get x by itself, we just divide by 24. And you get x equals 18 over 24, which we can reduce to 3/4. We divide both by 6. 18 divided by 6 is 3. 24 divided by 6 is 4. So let's try another one of these. 9 over 5 is equal to 12 over 3x plus 2. We just want to cross multiply 9 over 5 to 12 over 3x plus 2. Cross multiply and set them equal to each other. So we get 9 times 3x plus 2 is equal to 5 times 12. If we distribute, 9 times 3x is 27x plus 18. And 5 times 12 is 60. Now to get x by itself, we can then just subtract 18 from both sides. We get 27x is equal to 42. And then to get x by itself, we divide by 27. And we get x equals 42 over 27. Or if we reduce this by 3, (14 over 9). And so x is equal to 14 over 9. So at the end of this lesson, you should be able to solve linear equations using the general method, identify linear equations with infinite solutions or no solution, and solve proportions.